"Don't embarrass me tonight with that accent," she said as we pulled into the parking lot. A few months later, her company was begging me to save their $3.2 million disaster. My name is Cole. I am 31 years old and I own Harper Plumbing and Repairs here in Riverton, Tennessee. It is a small town about an hour outside Nashville, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody and we still wave at strangers on the road. I have been with Olivia for about a year now. She is this beautiful, smart woman who works as an interior designer for Bennett Fate Associates, some fancy firm in Nashville. We met when her company was doing work on a lake house project, and I handled all the plumbing installation. She told me she fell for my authentic charm and how refreshing it was to meet someone real. That was before tonight. She invited me to dinner with her work friends at this upscale wine bar called Meridian, said it was time I met her world. I was nervous, not going to lie, but I wanted to make a good impression. Bought myself a new button-down shirt, polished my boots until they gleamed, and made the hour drive into the city. That comment in the parking lot should have been my first warning, but I thought maybe she was just nervous too, you know. So I ignored the knot in my stomach and followed her inside. The place was everything I expected. Glass tables, dim lighting, wine that cost more per bottle than most people make in a day. Her friends were polished in that Nashville way. Chad, this architect with a Rolex and opinions about everything. Jenna, a marketing director for some tech startup who kept name-dropping clients. A few others whose names honestly blur together because of what happened next. The trouble started the moment I opened my mouth. I have got what you might call a pronounced southern drawl. Never bothered me before. Around here it is just how people talk. But when I said pleasure to meet y'all, I saw something change in their faces. Chad grinned and said, "Now that is a real accent right there. You sound like you just walked off the set of Duck Dynasty." The whole table laughed. Olivia laughed the loudest. Jenna leaned forward with this predatory smile and asked, "Wait, you are actually a plumber? Like you work with pipes and toilets and everything?" I kept my composure, smiled politely, and said, "Yes, ma'am, that is what I do for a living." Expected Olivia to maybe change the subject or say something supportive. Instead, she looked directly at me and said, "Oh, Cole's great with his hands," in this tone that made the whole table erupt. I just sipped my water and stayed quiet, but something cold settled in my chest. The conversation kept flowing around me like I was not even there. They talked about their trips to Paris, their Tesla leases, their career moves up the corporate ladder. Every comment felt designed to highlight how different I was from them. How small, how beneath them. My hands were wrapped around that water glass so tight I thought it might crack. I kept telling myself to stay calm, that maybe I was being too sensitive. Then Chad set down his wine glass and asked the question that changed everything. "So Cole, ever been on a plane that was not Spirit Airlines?" The table went quiet, waiting for my response like they were watching a nature documentary. I could feel Olivia tense up beside me. I smiled and replied, "No, sir, cannot say I have, but I am the guy who makes sure your fancy hotel showers actually have hot water when you get there." Dead silence for about 3 seconds. Then someone changed the subject quickly, but Jenna was not done. She started talking about people who settle in small towns because they cannot handle real competition. The whole time she is saying this, she is looking right at me, and Olivia just sits there nodding along like she agrees with every word. That is when something inside me went completely still. I reached for my wallet, pulled out enough cash to cover my meal and a generous tip, and placed it on the table. "Thank you for dinner," I said, standing up. "This has been very educational." Olivia's face went white. "Cole, don't be dramatic." "I am not being dramatic," I replied, looking directly at her. "I am just done pretending this is something it is not." And I walked out. I am writing this from my truck in their parking lot, watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. My hands are still shaking a little bit from the adrenaline. Olivia just texted me, "You completely embarrassed me in front of everyone. How could you just leave like that?" I have not responded yet because honestly I am still processing what just happened. The woman I thought I loved just sat there and watched her friends treat me like entertainment instead of her boyfriend. She did not just fail to defend me, she participated. She laughed the loudest when they mocked my accent. She made that comment about my hands like I was some kind of joke. So Reddit, am I wrong here? Should I have just laughed it off and played along? Because right now I am questioning everything about this relationship and I do not think there is any coming back from tonight. Update 1. We broke up the next week. Not with drama, just a quiet conversation where she said she needed to reassess her priorities. She packed her things from my place and went back to Nashville. We have not spoken since. I threw myself into work after that. Summers are always busy for plumbing in small towns, and this year was no exception. Fixed Mrs. Patterson's backed-up kitchen sink, replaced the Johnson's water heater, kept myself busy doing what I do best. It is honest work, and it kept me sane. Then Mother Nature decided to remind everyone exactly why my profession exists. We started getting weather warnings about a massive storm system moving through Middle Tennessee. Not your typical summer thunderstorm, but the kind that makes meteorologists use words like unprecedented and historic rainfall totals. The kind that makes small-town emergency coordinators start losing sleep. The storm hit on a Tuesday night. 11.8 inches of rainfall in 24 hours. For context, that is more rain than we typically see in 3 months. Power lines down everywhere, roads turned into rivers, and absolute chaos in the newer developments that got built on marginal drainage areas. At 5 in the morning, my phone rang. Emergency coordinator for the county. Cole, we need Harper Plumbing at Lakeview Heights immediately. We have got 42 homes flooded, and the entire water management system has failed catastrophically. I loaded up my truck with pumps, generators, and every piece of emergency equipment I owned, then headed out with my crew. Lakeview Heights is this upscale neighborhood that got marketed to Nashville professionals as their country retreat. Beautiful houses, manicured lawns, and apparently the worst drainage design in Tennessee history. What we found was biblical. Half the neighborhood was underwater. Not just from storm runoff, but because the entire residential water system had collapsed. Burst pipes, backed up storm drains, basements full of sewage. The kind of damage that takes months to repair and millions to fix. I waded through waist-deep water in some of those basements taking photographs and making notes. The smell was unbelievable. Raw sewage mixed with mud and everything people had stored down there now ruined. The emergency response team had set up their coordination center in the building with the biggest conference room in the area. As I pulled up covered in mud, I realized exactly which building that was. Bennett Fate Associates, Olivia's design firm. My stomach dropped, but I had a job to do. I walked into that conference room with my boots caked in mud and my work clothes soaked through, ready to give my professional assessment of what we were dealing with. And there, standing by a whiteboard trying to manage a room full of panicked homeowners, was Olivia. She looked different than I remembered. Hair in a messy ponytail, no makeup, wearing jeans and a company polo instead of her usual polished designer outfits. She looked exhausted and frankly terrified. She looked up when I walked in and the color drained from her face. "Cole," she said like she was seeing a ghost. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, keeping it completely professional. "I am here about the flood damage assessment." That is when the county inspector nearby overheard us and came over with a clipboard full of complaints. "Thank God you are here, Harper. This whole development is a disaster zone." Whoever designed the water management system for this place clearly had no idea what they were doing. We are looking at over $3 million in damage, and that is just the preliminary estimate. I watched Olivia's face go from pale to gray, because here is what I learned over the next 3 days of documenting everything. Bennett Fate Associates had been the primary contractor for all landscape design and water management infrastructure at Lakeview Heights, and somebody had made some spectacularly expensive mistakes. The drainage system was undersized by at least 40%. The storm sewers were routed incorrectly. The retention ponds were built in the wrong locations. It was like someone had designed the whole system to fail the moment it faced any real weather. I spent 72 hours documenting everything, taking photographs, writing technical assessments, measuring water damage. My back ached from crawling through flooded crawl spaces. My clothes never fully dried. I probably drank 20 cups of terrible emergency services coffee, but it was my job to assess and report objectively, nothing more. As I worked, the scope of what had gone wrong became crystal clear. During those 3 days, Olivia and I crossed paths several times. She kept looking like she wanted to say something, but never did. And honestly, I was not sure I wanted to hear it anyway. I had work to do and people depending on me to tell them the truth about what happened to their homes. When I submitted my report to the county, I had no idea what kind of storm I was about to unleash. All I did was document the facts. What failed, why it failed, and who was responsible for the original design. 3 weeks later, the local paper ran a front-page story with the headline "Design Flaws Led to Lakeview Heights Flood Disaster." Right there in black and white was my name as the expert who identified the core problems. By that Friday, my phone was ringing off the hook. 3 neighboring counties wanted to hire Harper Plumbing for infrastructure assessments. The State Engineering Board opened an investigation into the approval process for Lakeview Heights, and Bennett Fate Associates found themselves named in a class action lawsuit from 42 very angry homeowners. The same people who had laughed at my profession 3 months earlier were now facing career-ending consequences because they had not taken it seriously enough. But here is where it gets really interesting. Remember Chad and Jenna from that dinner? Chad's architectural firm had been the consulting contractor for the Lakeview Heights project. They lost their municipal contracts with 3 towns the following month. Jenna's marketing company had handled the promotional materials for the development, including claims about state-of-the-art water management. Her firm quietly settled 2 false advertising complaints and lost their biggest client. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. Update 2. Remember that report I filed about the drainage disaster at Lakeview Heights? The one that was supposed to be routine documentation. Well, that report just brought down an entire network of connected firms across Middle Tennessee. The county investigation concluded last month, and the findings were even more damaging than anyone expected. Bennett Fate Associates had not just cut corners on the water management system. They had been systematically underbidding projects by 40%, then making up the difference by using substandard materials and ignoring engineering specifications. Lakeview Heights was not their first failure. It was just their most expensive one. The final investigative report listed 17 separate code violations, 8 instances of fraudulent billing, and enough technical incompetence to fill a textbook on how not to design infrastructure. The Tennessee Board of Professional Engineers suspended 3 licenses. The Better Business Bureau received complaints about Bennett Fate Associates from 4 different counties. And somehow my name kept appearing in all the coverage as the expert witness who had identified the core systematic failures. Last Tuesday, the Nashville Business Journal ran a feature story titled "How One Small Town Contractor Exposed a $1 million Infrastructure Scam." The article included quotes from my technical reports and described me as the kind of professional who puts public safety ahead of politics. My phone has been ringing constantly ever since. 5 municipal governments have hired Harper Plumbing for comprehensive infrastructure assessments. The state wants me to consult on new contractor certification requirements. I have had to hire 2 additional crews just to keep up with demand. But here is the part that really gets me. 3 weeks ago, I got a text message from Olivia. "I heard about all the success you have been having. I know I don't deserve to ask, but could we maybe talk? I owe you a real apology for everything that happened." I stared at that message for about 10 minutes before responding. "I appreciate the sentiment, but I think we said everything we needed to say." She texted back immediately, "Please, Cole, just coffee. I need you to know that I understand now what I threw away." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at the little diner here in Riverton. Same place where she used to say she loved the authentic small-town charm. She showed up looking exhausted in a way I had never seen during our relationship. Designer clothes replaced with jeans and a simple sweater. Hair pulled back without the usual careful styling. She looked like someone who had been fighting battles and losing most of them. She started with an apology that seemed genuine. Said she had been thinking about that night at the wine bar every day since our breakup, that she finally understood how badly she had betrayed my trust. "I was so worried about impressing people whose opinions did not matter that I forgot to value the person whose opinion should have mattered most," she said. Her voice cracked a little when she said it. Then she told me about what had happened to her professionally. Bennett Fate Associates had demoted her to an assistant position and moved her off all major client accounts. The design industry in Nashville is smaller than people think, and being associated with a project that caused millions in damage does not look good on anyone's portfolio. "Losing that position was the wake-up call I needed," she continued. "I realized I had been living someone else's version of success instead of figuring out what actually mattered to me. I listened to everything she had to say. The apology felt genuine, and I appreciated her making the effort to clear the air between us. But here is what I have learned over these past months and what I told her as gently as I could. I forgive you, Olivia, but forgiveness does not mean we are compatible. She asked what I meant by that. You fell in love with the idea of me, I explained. The charming small-town guy who was different from your usual crowd. But when it came time to actually stand by that choice in front of people whose approval mattered to you, you could not do it. And that tells me something important about how you really see this relationship. She tried to argue. Said that she had changed, that everything that had happened had taught her about what really matters. And maybe that is true. But I had changed too over these months. I had remembered who I was before I started questioning myself to fit into her world. The conversation lasted about an hour and ended with both of us understanding that some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. We hugged goodbye, wished each other well, and went our separate ways. It was sad but also peaceful in a way, like closing a chapter that needed to end. Since then, Harper Plumbing has continued growing beyond anything I ever imagined. We are now the primary infrastructure contractor for 8 counties in Middle Tennessee. I have got 6 full-time employees, 3 trucks, and we are booked solid through next summer. More importantly, I have started dating again. Her name is Sarah. She teaches 3rd grade at Riverton Elementary. When I told her the story about that dinner in Nashville, she said those people sounded like insecure jerks who were probably intimidated by someone who actually builds things instead of just talking about them. That is the difference right there. The right person does not just accept who you are. They are proud of who you are. Final update. Harper Plumbing and Infrastructure Solutions, as we are now called, has become the premier water systems contractor for all of Middle Tennessee. We have got 12 full-time employees, a fleet of specialized vehicles, and a reputation that stretches from Knoxville to Memphis. More importantly, we are doing work that matters, helping communities build infrastructure that will last for generations. The success has been surreal. Last month, the governor's office asked me to serve on the Tennessee Water Systems Advisory Board. Next week, I am testifying before a state legislative committee about new contractor certification requirements. The guy with the country accent who got laughed out of a wine bar is now helping write policy for the entire state. But the real satisfaction comes from the day-to-day work, training apprentices, solving complex engineering problems. Knowing that families across dozens of communities have clean, reliable water because of systems my team designed and installed. That is the kind of success that actually means something. Not the fancy titles or the recognition, but the knowledge that the work matters. Sarah and I are talking about marriage. She is the kind of woman who brings me lunch at job sites and brags to her teacher friends about her boyfriend who keeps civilization running. When her students ask what I do, she tells them I am an engineer who makes sure everyone has clean water. The pride in her voice when she says that is worth more than all the professional recognition in the world. Last week, one of her students drew me a picture of a superhero fixing pipes. Sarah framed it and put it on my desk at the office. Last month brought the perfect ending to the Olivia chapter of this story. I was driving through Nashville after a meeting with state officials when I stopped at a red light near the downtown business district. In the crosswalk, walking with purpose in a professional outfit, was Olivia. She looked good, confident, put together like she had found her footing again. Our eyes met through my windshield for just a moment. She smiled and gave me a small wave. I waved back. The light turned green and we both continued on our separate paths. Later that evening, curiosity got the better of me and I looked up what she had been doing. Turns out she had landed a position with a firm called Sustainable Design Partners, where she specializes in environmentally conscious infrastructure projects. According to their website, she is working on water-conscious landscape design for schools and municipal buildings. It seems like the whole experience taught her something about getting the technical details right. I am genuinely glad for her. It took me months to get to this point, but I hope she has found whatever she was looking for. The bigger picture lesson from all of this hit me during a conversation I had last week. I was speaking to the graduating class at Tennessee College of Applied Technology about career opportunities in skilled trades. After the formal presentation, a young woman approached me with a question. "Mr. Harper, my boyfriend's family keeps asking when I am going to get a real job instead of becoming an electrician. How do you deal with people who do not respect what you do?" I looked at this bright, capable young woman who was about to enter a profession that keeps the lights on in every building in America, and I realized I knew exactly what to tell her. You do not need to deal with people who do not respect honest work, I said. You just need to find people who do. Trust me, the difference is everything. That is really what this whole story has been about. Not revenge, not proving anyone wrong, but learning to value yourself enough to walk away from people who do not value you. 6 months ago, someone I cared about was embarrassed by my accent and ashamed of my profession. Today, that same accent gets respectful attention when I am briefing state legislators about infrastructure policy. The work that used to be dismissed as just plumbing is now recognized as essential engineering expertise. Nothing about me changed. What changed was my understanding of who deserves a seat at my table. The funny thing about storms is that they reveal what is built to last and what is just held together by appearances. That storm that flooded Lakeview Heights did not just expose the flaws in someone else's work. It washed away my own illusions about trying to impress people whose respect was not worth having in the first place. These days, when someone asks what I do for a living, I stand a little straighter and tell them I am an infrastructure engineer. I design and build water systems that keep communities healthy and safe. I train the next generation of skilled professionals. I solve problems that matter, and I am never ever ashamed of the work I do or where I come from.